Hi and welcome everyone. Welcome, welcome. My name is Natalie Augusto Filion and I'm Chief Sustainability Officer for the City of Newark. Very excited to be with you all here tonight. Happy Earth Day. Happy belated Earth Day. It was yesterday. But this is one of the many activities taking place around the city in celebration of Earth Day. What I'm going to share for anyone who's watching this on Channel 78 or on the Newark TV YouTube channel is that we are offering this game in community centers in your community. So if you would like us to come out and facilitate this workshop for residents in a block club association or for a school group or something like that, please just reach out to us. You can find our contact information fairly easily at newarknj.gov/sustainability. That is newarknj.gov/sustainability. Okay, and with that, what I'm going to do is just welcome everyone here and turn it over to our gracious hosts, the Weequahic Park Association Director, Winifred Victor Hines.
Thank you, Natalie, and welcome everyone, and happy Earth Day. Like Natalie said, it was yesterday, but we are continuing with the celebrations because Earth Day is not only one day, it should be every day of the year. So we should practice that, and whatever we learn, put it into action. So I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Winifred Victor Hines, and I am the Executive Director of the Weequahic Park Association. And also, I am an Environmental Commissioner, Newark Environmental Commission. And we meet, I would love to invite you all to our meetings. We meet every month, the first Wednesday of the month. So our next meeting is coming up. And so we would love for you to participate, and we would love for you also to come here and partake in whatever event the Weequahic Park Association has. And we've been around since 1992, and we're going to be around for another at least 50 years, I hope. At least 50, maybe not me, but somebody else. And we would love to welcome you here to the building whenever you want. Come by, whatever events, anything that we can help you with, especially resources around environmental and social justice issues. So without any further ado, Natalie, you come, or Shaquille, who's second? Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you so much, everyone. I want to start by just giving you a very high-level overview of how the evening's going to unfold so you sort of know what to expect. And then we're going to start with a little bit of slides. So basically, today we'll start with a very high-level overview, and then we'll invite everyone to come over to this table where we'll do the gameplay all together. So we need all 11, 12 people who are here to make their way over there as soon as we're done with these slides. After that, we're going to be doing basically 10 to 15 minutes of facilitated conversation, and there's workbooks on the table that help you sort of work through that activity. We'll give you a very high-level overview of what it looks like and then talk through each piece of the activity. That will unfold over about 2 hours. So we're scheduled, it's about 7 o'clock now. I don't have a wristwatch, but it's little after 7 o'clock now, and we'll be done with that by 9. That's what we're timing for. And when you registered, we did ask you if you could stay for the whole event, so I hope that everyone is planning on doing that, because if not, our poor town of Muggytown is going to be losing key decision makers as it's planning for climate change. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to be moving back and forth a little bit to advance the slides, or maybe Shaquille, you can help me. Shaquille Farron here is going to be supporting the program, the facilitation tonight. And I'm going to give him a chance to introduce himself in just a second. But before I do that, I want to pitch that Shaquille came to the Office of Sustainability through an Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Fellowship facilitated by the Urban Sustainability Directors Networks, the folks who basically designed this training. And this training activity has been offered over the country in dozens of municipalities and towns, cities who are facing climate impacts the way we are. There's a Game of Floods, which was the original real one because, as we all know, the sea levels are rising and extreme storms are quite disruptive and really damaging, as we have experienced. There's also a game of heat that is done in other parts of the very hot parts in the sort of the middle of the country, and then this game of extremes combines both of those types of disasters for cities like ours that are experiencing both extreme heat events and flooding events. So Shaquille helped us to launch a climate justice ambassadors program designed for high school youth in Newark to learn about the climate impacts in the city and how they overlap with environmental justice. And that cohort of high school students is going to be offering workshops, activities with the community. We have another cohort, our second cohort will be trained this summer, and I actually have a job description here because up until next Saturday night, there are still spots available for folks who may have young people in your lives who you want to encourage to join the Climate Justice Ambassadors training opportunity. The training opportunity unfolds over the course of the Summer Youth Employment Program, which is sort of those July to August summer jobs that the city helps to facilitate. And then our program has grant funding to continue to provide a paid internship opportunity to these high school students to work with community-based organizations on climate preparedness and climate justice work over the course of the calendar year of their academic year. So I wanted to make sure that everybody is aware of that, and huge kudos to Shaquille for helping us to launch that program. You can just introduce yourself and tell folks where you're from and what you do.
Hi everyone, so my name is Shaquille Farron Elliott and I am the program assistant for the Office of Sustainability until 10:01 p.m. tonight. So previously to that, as Natalie mentioned, I came on as the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Fellow, and then I took on the role as program assistant when that fellowship ended. And yeah, that's just a little bit about me. So I'll turn it back over to Natalie.
Okay, so why are we doing this training? What is the purpose of this activity? Our hope here is to help you all get a little bit deeper understanding, particularly in terms of some of the terminology that climate scientists use. And so we'll talk about climate change vulnerability, we'll talk about risk assessments, and we'll go through a very micro exercise of adaptation planning. So what folks like my office and our counterparts do to think about what does 2070, what does 2100 look like in our community, and how do we position ourselves to protect assets, lives, and make sure that we're well and prepared. So I want to give a very high-level overview of the kinds of impacts that we're experiencing in the United States and in our region. So when we talk about extreme heat, essentially what we're talking about is the slow trend in weather, which I think a lot of folks have probably observed over the course of living anywhere in this region. If you grew up in Newark and have been here, then you may remember that there were more snow events in the winter than there were this past winter, for example. And so we see that through scientific observations in stations like there are some stations in the middle of the ocean, basically, that are tracking the temperature change. And we have very clear observations, even from ice cores that are pulled out of the Arctic, of how the temperatures are rising very slowly. In cities like ours, where we don't have a lot of trees and we don't have a lot of green spaces, this is actually an oasis inside of the city of Newark. We end up having what's called an urban heat island. So that means that in places where there's not a lot of green space, a lot of forest, it's hotter. And I think we've all experienced that. When you're walking down the street and there's shade versus when you're standing and waiting for the bus and there's no shelter of any kind, it is considerably hotter. In Newark, it can be anywhere from 6 to 13 to 20 degrees hotter than other parts of Essex County during those hot summer months. And so that's what we call urban heat island. And what kinds of impacts does that bring? I mean, we all know the lived experience of that discomfort, the quality of life, but there are vulnerable groups that experience, respiratory distress. Newark has a much higher asthma rate than the rest of the country, the rest of the state and many other parts of the country. Anyone who works outside, anyone who is an athlete and is playing outside, those extreme heat events are particularly challenging. And I will say that one solution that we've already started to implement is that we learned through our analysis that the turfs that kids are using to like play soccer or whatever, in and of themselves are mini urban heat islands because that synthetic material is trapping the heat and reabsorbing it while the kids were playing. And so now our specifications for the city of Newark, whenever we're upgrading a park, we're upgrading to different kinds of synthetic material that absorb heat and don't cause that additional distress. Now, the other impact that we face is flooding, and flooding is actually one of our number one concerns when it comes to the Newark Master Plan process. So you may have heard that we're undergoing what's called Newark 360. It's a series of community conversations to help us vision, well, how do we want our city to develop in terms of the land use, in terms of the regulations that govern what goes where over the next 10 years. So you may actually receive even a survey in the mail. They're doing a sort of statistically valid survey instrument. They're doing lots of community meetings, so keep your eyes and ears open. And if you didn't register, please make sure that I have your email address so I make sure that you get that information about those future conversations. Sorry, one more. I wasn't done. But flooding is actually one of the top things that comes up, in addition to sort of the amenities and the quality of our parks and open space and our preparedness for energy disruptions. When we talk about flooding, we're talking about different kinds of flooding. We're talking about basically resisting the ocean, the sea. We are tidally influenced because the Newark Bay is attached to the New York Bay, which is attached to the Atlantic Ocean, right? So when there are storms or when the sea level is rising, we're affected by that. We're also talking about riverine flooding, and that is often because of heavy rainfall events. And then we're talking about another term that I actually just learned yesterday called aerial flooding. And I think this summer, Ida actually is a really perfect example of that, where it just dumped on us for a really long time, and that caused flooding in places that we had never seen flooding before. That was, once in a life, like we've never seen that kind of flood the way we saw in Ida. So we're planning for extreme heat, and we're planning for various different kinds of flooding. So when we talk about extreme precipitation, that can be, extreme storms like Sandy, for example. That can be an example like Irene. I already mentioned Ida. There were actually 3 very heavy rainfall events just this summer, other than the crazy named storm of Ida. And so we're talking about, a large amount of rain falling in a small amount of time. And this chart sort of shows you over the course of 110 years how many more precipitation events, rainfall events, are exceeding the capacity of our systems to manage them, right? So our infrastructure is designed for a historical storm, right? When we put in the sewer and the stormwater pipes, we expected the rain to look a certain way. Rainfall patterns are changing, and that's how you see that sort of represented on this chart. And what kind of impacts? Again, you know this already, I don't have to tell you. We see impacts to property, we see environmental impacts in that maybe brownfields or areas that have some soil contamination are now leaching some of that soil contamination into our waterways. We may see disruption to the supply chain. A lot of the shelves were empty in the grocery stores during Sandy because folks couldn't get to gas, or they couldn't refuel vehicles, or they couldn't get into the city because of disruptions in terms of the flooding. And so I can share this slide deck out after. In fact, I definitely want to make sure we have all your email addresses, because we have a survey that we'd like you to take about this program and how to sort of improve it and make it. It's a lot of information that we're trying to condense into a short amount of time. But these are all websites where you can learn a little bit more about these issues. And so what we're going to do now is talk to you a little bit about how cities prepare for climate change, right? What do we do? The first thing that we do is we look at the science, and I showed you a little bit of what the science is telling us. The next thing we do is we start to look at a map to figure out what's in harm's way. Where are the schools? Where are the daycare centers? Where are the dialysis centers? Where are our emergency facilities? How do we make sure that we know exactly where everything is, so that when we build different scenarios or model different scenarios, we can see what's in harm's way? Next, we assess the vulnerability of each of those assets. And we'll talk about vulnerability in a little bit, so I'm just going to hold off on that word. And in addition to assessing vulnerability, we're looking at what does that mean in terms of risk, in terms of the threat to our day-to-day lives. We use all of that information, the science, the understanding of where what is important to us is located, the understanding of how vulnerable and what degree of risk all of those assets are in. And then we start planning. So all of this is in service to the plan development. As we're planning, we're implementing. What we know is that adaptation is the activity that you can start immediately. We can immediately start to better prepare ourselves. Even in our own households, we can have, our medication cards in our wallet so that if we experience a disruption and are out of our home for whatever reason, we can be that much more ready to sort of tell someone about our medication needs. We can be ready with who we call in different kinds of emergency events or do fire drills at home the way they do at school. And last but not least, and it sort of is part of the cycle, is that we are needing to constantly monitor, right? What do we know? What's the latest climate science telling us? And how do we understand how effective the strategies that we've started to implement are in addressing the needs that we have? So these are the steps that the game follows. We're going to start with reviewing the science. And this map that you're going to see when you sit down at the table actually lays out the science for this fictitious town, Muggy Town. We're going to do an inventory of all the assets. There are 19 asset cards, which you'll see when you sit down, and you'll look at them. What are these assets? Where's our daycare center? Where's our low-income housing? Where's our bike paths? Where's our transportation hubs, et cetera? We are going to actually we're going to do the vulnerability, but we're going to skip the risk step just to save time since we started a little late. It's totally fine. Your packets will walk you through it in case you want to take your packet home and learn a little bit more about that. But it's not that hard to sort of understand what comes next after assessing vulnerability. And then you're going to start being in the power position of planning for how Muggy Town can be better prepared for the future. We'll give you a budget. We'll give you a disaster event to plan for, and we're going to go through that activity. And with that, I will turn it over to our fearless gameplay leader, Shaquille.